Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for the host of today's special, Mr. Lemon!
Yo, what's up guys? We're back with another video today. The UFC in 2024, guys, has seen some crazy things this year. Some were good, while others were...
John Jones is the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, period, end of story. Greatest fighter to ever live. Ever. It's fucking John Jones. When you look at John Jones, he's never lost a fight.
They weren't great, let's be honest. We had some great fights this year. We had some really bad ones, like genuinely horrible fights. I'd be like, there were some really stinky ones a lot this year, I'm not gonna lie. But that made the good ones really good. We had some iconic UFC events that will go down in the history of the UFC, while we had some very forgettable ones. But the question is, guys, which one of these were the best and were also the worst? So let me introduce to you all the UFC Oscar ceremony, where the most prestigious awards are given out to the best and the worst aspects of the UFC. So without further ado, let me introduce you to the categories that I have chosen. The best UFC event of 2024. The worst UFC event of 2024. The best UFC fight of the year. The worst UFC fight of the year. Worst UFC robbery of 2024. The best knockout of the year. The best submission of the year. The best MMA YouTuber of 2024. The best performance of 2024. The best prospect of the year. And finally, the UFC fighter of 2024. Now, without further ado, guys, let us get into the first category. Alright, for our first category, the best UFC event of 2024, we have 4 nominees, guys. And those 4 nominees are UFC 300, Alex Pereira vs. Jamal Hill, UFC 299, Sean O'Malley vs. Marlon Vera 2, UFC Fight Night, Petr Yan vs. Davison Figueiredo, and finally, UFC 308, Ilia Topuria vs. Max Holloway. And guys, here's the thing, all 4 of these events are just legendary UFC events. Amazing fights, amazing moments, they will forever be iconic. And without further ado, drum roll please. And the winner is UFC 300. So many iconic moments. The Holloway KO, the Alex Pereira KO. You know, there was just so many iconic moments from 300. It was probably the easiest one for me to decide. So UFC 300, you win the UFC Oscar award for Best UFC Event of 2024. Alright, for our next category, the worst UFC event of 2022. Without further ado, let me introduce to you the nominees. UFC 302, Islam Makhachev vs. Dustin Poirier. UFC 307, Alex Pereira vs. Khalil Roundtree. UFC 297, Sean Strickland vs. Dricus du Plessis. And finally, UFC Fight Night, Marcin Tybura vs. Sergey Spivak 2. I mean, these are just some stinker events right here, guys. I mean, let's be honest. But, without further ado, the winner for the worst UFC event of 2024 is UFC Fight Night, Marcin Tybura vs. Sergey Spivak 2. Listen, all these events were not good, but the reason that made Marcin Tybura vs. Sergey Spivak the worst is all of these other events had one big moment that people will remember them by. Marcin Tybura vs. Sergey Spivak had literally nothing. It's a fight night card in the Apex, and arguably the worst, Apex of the year, so it had nothing to be remembered. The next category, ladies and gentlemen, the best UFC fight of 2024. Now, there are a lot of good contenders for this year, guys, but I have picked 4 nominees for this category. So without further ado, let me introduce you to them. Islam Makhachev vs. Dustin Poirier at UFC 302. Mateusz Rebecki vs. Motubek Orabai at UFC 308. Alex Pereira vs. Khalil Roundtree at UFC 307. And finally, Daniel Zalhubert vs. Esteban Ribovics at UFC 306. Now here's the thing, guys. All these fights were high level. They were all amazing, and really it came down to 2 fights. And I've gone back and forth between these 2. In my opinion, you could do either one, but I'm pretty confident with the winner of the best fight of 2024, That being Islam Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier. I know. Listen, was Daniel Sahuber versus Esteban Rivovic a more fun fight? Yes, but to me, what I like from a fight of the year isn't just how fun it is, but also just the high levelness. I'm a sucker for like high level fights, like displaying everything about mixed martial arts. So to me, Islam Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier is my fight of the year of 2024. But guys, here's the thing. We've talked about some of the best fights this year, some of the greatest fights this year, right? At the same time, we had some of the worst fights this year, some of the most horrible, disgraceful fights that everyone hates. Like, everyone can collectively agree that these are the worst fights. So, with that being said, let me announce the nominees for the worst UFC fights of 2024. Muhammad Mokaev versus Manel Kape at UFC 304. Tyson Pedros versus Vitor Petrino at UFC Fight Night Rosenstrike versus Shamil Gaziev. Jose Aldo versus Mario Batista at UFC 307. And finally, Raquel Pennington versus Bruno Silva at UFC 297. And here's the thing, guys. All these fights are horrible. They are disgraceful. They are boring, whatever you call them. But there's one fight out of all these that stands out the most. And that one, for the worst fight of 2024, is Manel Kape versus Muhammad Mokaev. I mean, here, what makes this fight like exponentially horrible compared to the other ones is the fact that this was the most hyped one out of all of them. Yes, Mario Batista and Jose Aldo was exciting because it's Jose Aldo, right? But this one had actual drama. Like, these guys were getting into it before the fight actually started. They were literally trying to fight before the fight actually even started, like a couple minutes beforehand. And then the moment the fight is actually happening, they don't want to fight. They're just like jabbing away. They're doing little kicks. They're doing like little punches every like 5 minutes. So this fight was so bad, guys, that the UFC cut Muhammad Mokaev from the promotion immediately after this fight. And to me, that is why Muhammad Mokaev versus Manel Kape is the worst UFC fight of 2024. Guys, do you know what's been prevalent this year? UFC robberies. We've had so many robberies, so many controversial decisions. It's been ridiculous in 2024 for the UFC. That is why that I have decided to nominate the 4 worst robberies of the UFC. Ciryl Gane getting the win over Alexander Volkov at UFC 310. Juliana Pena getting the win over Raquel Pennington at UFC 307. Rinia Fakhretdinov getting the win over Carlos Lee at UFC 308. And finally, Christian Rodriguez getting the win over Isaac Dugarian at UFC Fight Night Taito Iwaza versus Marcin Tybura. Now, guys, all of these are horrible robberies. Like, I can't really say much about this category because they're all just robberies. There's not much to say the fact that they were robberies. But there is one fight here that is the biggest robbery of 2024. And the worst robbery of 2024 is Ciryl Gane getting the win over Alexander Volkov at UFC 310. Was it like the clearest robbery out of all these? Not necessarily, but Volkov clearly won the second and third round. Everybody agrees that Volkov should have won that fight. Out of all these, this is like the biggest robbery of 2024 as well. So that holds some factor into this decision as well, guys. But guys, you know, I've been talking a lot of the bad stuff this year in the UFC. So why don't we talk about something more positive? Like the best knockouts of the year. You know, we had so many good knockouts this year, which is why I have 6 nominees for this category. So without further ado, let me announce each of them. Dustin Jacoby KOing Vitor Petrino at UFC Fight Night Kobe Covington versus Joaquin Buckley. Ilia Topuria KOing Max Holloway at UFC 308. Sharapoutin Magomedov KOing Armen Petrosyan at UFC 308, Max Holloway KOing Justin Gaethje at UFC 300, Vinicius Oliveira KOing Renato Sopai at UFC Fight Night Rosenstrike vs. Shamil Gaziev, and finally, Alex Pereira KOing Yuri Prohaska at UFC 303. Now, guys, we had so many good KOs this year. I mean, just look at them. Like, they are some amazing KOs. They're vicious, you know. I think this is going to be a very close... It's Max Holloway. I mean, Max Holloway KOing Justin Gaethje is the best knockout of the year, guys. Was there really any competition? Like, I didn't need to hype you guys up for this one. We all knew this one. Let's just get out of the way. Max Holloway KOing Justin Gaethje was, like, the greatest knockout, if not ever. Let's be honest. But, guys, you know something that doesn't get talked about as much? UFC submissions, and that is why I have 4 nominees for the best submissions of 2024. So allow me to nominate them. Islam Makhachev submitting Dustin Poirier at UFC 302. Khamzat Chimaev submitting Robert Whittaker at UFC 308. Anthony Hernandez submitting Roman Kopylov at UFC 298. And finally, Brian Ortega submitting Yair Rodriguez at UFC Fight Night. Brian Ortega versus Yair Rodriguez. And you know, guys, all these submissions, some of these submissions are more creative than others, but there's one here that I think is the most impressive. And that, for the best submission of 2024, is Khamzat Chimaev submitting Robert Whittaker. I mean, nobody does that to Robert Whittaker, guys. Nobody does that to Robert Whittaker, especially in the first round. And the crazy part about this submission, guys, is the fact that Khamzat didn't really have it in his underneath the throat. He had his arm wrapped around his chin, but he broke Robert Whittaker's bottom teeth. I mean, that's not even impressive. That's just terrifying. Like, that kind of, like, spooked me a little when I heard about that. I was like, wow, that's crazy. So, if you're breaking someone's jaw while doing a submission, you have to get submission of the year for me. And, guys, you know something? We can't talk about the UFC in 2024 without talking about something very important. MMA YouTubers. MMA YouTubers this year have been carrying the UFC so badly. And that's why I thought that MMA YouTubers should have their own category, because there were a lot of good MMA YouTubers this year. And we're going to see who was the best MMA YouTuber of the year. Again, this is all just opinions. They're all goated. I'm not going to disrespect nobody. Bedtime MMA, Hooper MMA, The Weasel MMA, MMA Che, MMA Guru, MMA On Point, Lucas Tracy, and finally, Lionel Rivera. And again, before I announce who I think was MMA YouTuber of the year, I just want everyone to know that all of them are goated. Like, they are all very talented. They are all making really good videos, great for the community, and I have nothing but respect to all these people. With that being said, guys, your winner for the best MMA YouTuber of 2024 is MMA Guru. Here's the thing with MMA Guru. He has actually made such a big impact. He's one of the few, like, MMA YouTubers, besides like MMA On Point, who got to interview some big UFC stars like Tom Aspinall, Dricus du Plessis, Colby Covington, Joaquin Buckley. Like, these are some big names, and this is only one guy. This is a one-man army. He's done all this all by himself, so you can't deny he puts in the work. He puts in the grind, and it shows. But you know, guys, a lot of the top guys in the UFC, they're all old heads. You know, they're getting old. They're getting out of their prime. So we need some new guys to come up. And this year we've had a lot of good prospects showing up. Some of them are beating like the old guys badly. So I have nominated 6 prospects of 2024. So allow me to announce them. Bo Nickel, Gene Silva, Carlos Prates, Sharaputin Magomedov, Felipe Lima, and finally Diego Lopez. And you know, guys, all of these guys, some of them haven't fought as much, but you can tell that these guys are legit. Their skills are very, like, profound, and they are just very well-rounded. Some of them have proven to be championship material. But out of all of these prospects, one stands out among the rest. And that person, for the winner of the best prospect of 2024 for the UFC, is Diego Lopez. Listen, Diego Lopez, I feel like people will get a little bit confused on this. Some people don't view Diego Lopez as a prospect anymore. They just view him as a regular contender now. But at the beginning of the year, guys, Diego Lopez wasn't even ranked. And I remember when he fought his first ranked opponent, which was Sadiq Youssef, people thought that was going to be a very tough fight for him, and Diego Lopez ran through him like ease. He then fought Dan Ige and got the win over there, and then he fought one of the top guys in the division, Brian Ortega, and he schooled him. He schooled Brian Ortega, and now he's on the verge of a title shot. So that, to me, from being unranked to being arguably getting a title shot, says enough for me that you are the best prospect of 2024. But you know, guys, one thing that all the old guys from the division and all of the new guys in the division have in common is that they will put on great performances, right? We've had some insane performances. Some of them were upsets and made them even greater performances. So I have nominated 6 of the best performances of 2024. So allow me to announce them. Max Holloway destroying Justin Gaethje at UFC 300. Ilia Topuria becoming the first person ever to knock out Max Holloway at UFC 308. Petr Yan putting on a masterclass against Deiveson Figueiredo at UFC Fight Night, Yan vs. Figueiredo. Khamzat Chimaev destroying Robert Whittaker within the first round at UFC 308. Alex Pereira ending the rivalry with Yuri Prochazka, putting him out cold at UFC 303. And finally, Ilia Topuria ending the reign of Alexander Volkanovski at UFC 298. Now, guys, I'm going to be straight up honest. All these, it was very hard for me to decide which one of them were, because each of them are special in their own ways and what the fighter did in order to get, that amazing performance. But I think I've picked out the best one. And that, for the winner of the best performance of 2024 is Ilia Topuria becoming the first UFC fighter to KO Max Holloway. What makes me have this as the best performance of 2024, guys, is, for one, Max Holloway arguably could have had the best performance of 2024 by destroying Justin Gaethje, right? That, if this fight never happened, I would have said Max Holloway versus Justin Gaethje was best performance of the year. So to me, but then Topuria comes in and becomes the first person to KO Max Holloway. And also, nobody has ever knocked out Max Holloway, and many people have tried. Justin Gaethje tried, Dustin Poirier tried, Conor McGregor tried. All these fighters, all these insane level guys, they all tried to knock out Holloway, but none of them could. And Ilia Topuria shows up and is the first person to KO Max Holloway. So for me, that alone is the best performance of the year by far. And guys, I've been saving the best one for last, or at least, let's be real, the one that everybody's excited for. The fighter of the year for the UFC in 2024. I have 4 nominees for this category. And without further ado, let me announce the 4 nominees. Alex Pereira, Ilia Topuria, Dricus du Plessis, and finally Diego Lopez. But guys, it really just came down to Alex Pereira and Ilia Topuria, right? I'm not trying to disrespect Dricus du Plessis and Diego Lopez, right? But what they have accomplished is not on the same scale as Ilia Topuria and Alex Pereira, right? And when it comes to Alex Pereira and Ilia Topuria, it was really close for me to decide, right? But I believe that I've chosen the right person for this. And with that out of the way, guys, the winner for the best UFC fighter of 2024 is Alex Pereira. Now, here's the thing, guys. I know some people will disagree with this and say that Ilia Topuria is fighter of the year. And don't get me wrong, it's very close. Does Topuria have more quality wins over Alex Pereira? Yes, that's just a fact. KOing Max Holloway and Volkanovski back-to-back is just much better than Alex Pereira beating Yuri Prochazka, Jamal Hill, and Khalil Roundtree, right? But here's the thing. Alex Pereira did those things on short notice. When he fought Jamal Hill at 300, that was a short notice fight. That was supposed to be at 301, I believe. And he took that on a short notice and KO'd him. Alex Pereira took a short notice against Yuri Prochazka, arguably an even tougher fight for him than Jamal Hill, on a 2 weeks notice, by the way, and KO'd him as well. Made him look so easy. And then took another short notice against Khalil Roundtree, and Khalil Roundtree almost beat Pereira, but Pereira was able to come back and show him that he is the champion of his division. He did all those at 180 days, and he broke so many records this year. That, to me, shows that Alex Pereira is the fighter of the year, just because of everything he's done this year. He's carried 3 pay-per-views in a row. And to me, that proves that Alex Pereira is fighter of the year in 2024. And guys, that is the UFC Oscar of 2024. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm excited for what 2025 holds for the UFC and just making videos in general. I genuinely like doing this, and I will see you in the next video.